Yo, what's going on, Poke Bros? It's Teal6 once again, and I am going to do the fourth entry in Smogon Gold today. So this one is actually one of my favorite games I've ever seen. It is from not the most recent Smogon Tour finals, but the one before that, featuring Tesung versus Mcmeghan. This match is in black-white. It was the second game played in their series. The first game ended with a victory for Tesung, so Mcmeghan needed to win this game to remain in contention for the trophy. This is the final, so whoever won this won the entire tournament. Both of them previous Smogon Tour winners, so whoever won also was the first, or actually I think second, double winner of the pink trophy. Actually, I'm not sure if maybe Vil or someone like that has two, but there's a few guys from the early days that have one Smogon Tour and one OST, but regardless. So here we have a black-white game. Both of these players are able to use more or less anything in this tier, and in any tier they're both pretty creative. Mcmeghan especially likes to bring some pretty wild shit from time to time. Personally, I think he is perhaps the best player in Smogon history. He's got to be up there at least. His results for the period when he was like seriously playing were just outrageous. He's won more tournaments than anyone else on the website. And over on the other side, Tesung, if you've watched any of the videos on my channel where he is featured, I think he is probably the most featured player at this point aside from myself. You'll know how highly I think of him. Tesung is just an amazing, he's a very natural player, probably the most natural player on the site, without even thinking, the guy who just wins games, and he does it in the way that he wants. So, looking at this game, you have some, Tesung's team's a little bit more standard. Mcmeghan has two entries that, you don't see super often in a black-white team. So Tesung has the Tyranitar Shaman, which is, Shaman itself is a pretty weird mon to have, actually. It's not seen in black-white OU very often. Magnezone, Garchomp, Slowking, and Skarmory. And over on Mcmeghan's side, you have Slowking, Breloom, Dragonite, which is a pretty esoteric choice, Scizor, Tyranitar, and Mamoswine, another kind of stranger choice. So, getting into it, Mcmeghan leads Tyranitar, Tesung leads Shaman. Mcmeghan leads Tyranitar primarily, I think, because he wants to get his rocks up as soon as possible. And you'll see pretty soon exactly why he does that. Tesung anti-leads the rock lead, I think. Shaman has a good matchup against three of Mcmeghan's mons, and maybe Breloom depending on its set. So this is a pretty all-around lead for Tesung. He anti-leads the rocks, and he also kind of covers half of Mcmeghan's team, regardless of what he decides to go with. So Mcmeghan pulls out of the way, not wanting to take a Seed Flare to the face. The Seed Flare does come off and does next to nothing. The Scizor does get the Spadef drop, though. So Mcmeghan has to be fearful of the HP Fire here, I believe. So Tesung pulls out of the way, brings in Shaman, just as Mcmeghan goes for the U-turn, I guess, predicting that. He hits off the Skarmory and gets to bring in his Breloom, which should likely outspeed and be able to put it to sleep with Spore. So Tesung pulls that back out of the way and lets his Tyranitar take the Spore. So that's asleep now. We do not see the Toxic Orb on Breloom, which lets us know that it's Technician. He winds up for a Focus Punch and manages to slam that right into the Slowking. Does a pretty hefty amount of damage as the Fighting Gem increases the power. Tesung has to dance around this in a pretty careful way, because he has, there's nothing on his team that really enjoys facing a Breloom. Bullet Seed does a ton to Garchomp and Slowking. Any of the fighting stabs take out Tyranitar or Magnezone. Shaman it'll still take a lot from a Focus Punch, and same with Skarmory. It doesn't want to switch in on a Focus Punch. So Tesung pulls Breloom out of the way and goes right back into Tyranitar. Mcmeghan does that. Tesung just goes for the Psyshock, I guess, risking the outspeeding and the Bullet Seed. Mcmeghan gets up his rocks as Tesung heals back basically to full. knowing that Mcmeghan's going to go for the rocks there, he decides to take his chance to bring Slowking to a higher amount of health. He gets out of the way as we see Garchomp come in, as a Fire Blast comes off from Mcmeghan. This is a strong indication that it might actually have Ice Beam, but because it's tough to tell exactly what Tyranitar is going to pack. So it has Rocks and Fire coverage. So its other options are a Rock Attack, a Dark Attack, Pursuit probably, maybe. Ice Beam if it is specially focused. I don't actually know that roll, but 16% against the Garchomp is pretty decent. So it does come off with the Ice Beam, going down to its Focus Sash. So that's another example of me saying exactly like what I said before. Mcmeghan does like to run some pretty strange stuff, and Focus Sash Ice Beam Tyranitar is definitely a good example of that. In Black-White, that'll catch things like the Garchomp or Landorus T, which will feel comfortable setting up rocks or just laying into Tyranitar with the knowledge that they are faster. So Focus Sash, definitely an item you don't see terribly often. So Tesung brings back out the Shaman, which, like I said, has pretty decent matchup against everything on Mcmeghan's team. I believe Mcmeghan just stays in here as Tesung doubles out right into the Magnezone. Yeah, Mcmeghan's fine with letting his Tyranitar go down. That's a decent play from Tesung, because it's actually a pretty good play. Because if Mcmeghan wanted to save Tyranitar as sack fodder, he's going right into the Scizor again, right? But if Mcmeghan wants to let Tyranitar just go down now, he's obviously, like, he'll go for the ice. Tesung hedged his bets that he would go for the ice attack and get guaranteed damage off on the Shaman as opposed to the Fire Blast. So he pulls the Magnezone back out of the way, having predicted that wrong, and takes the Fire Blast to the face. With Slowking, it does absolutely nothing to it. He's not too worried about that. So the next turn, Mcmeghan still is fine with just letting this go down. He wants to re-establish momentum by sacking up the Tyranitar. Tesung scalds it and gets that out of the way. So we see Scizor come in again. Obviously, Tesung is not going to want to take this U-turn to the face, so he bounces off the Skarmory and is able to pull back out. He goes into his own Slowking, which threatens this with a burn, with maybe a T-Wave or something along those lines. Tesung pulls out of the way and goes out into his own. I'm sorry, I skipped right past that. So he pulls that, goes out into the Slowking, as Mcmeghan doubles back out into the Scizor. Good play on his part, knowing that Magnezone's probably not going to come out right directly into Slowking, especially because he does want to use it to trap the Scizor at some point. He U-turns off of the Slowking for an appreciable amount of damage, 54%, but Tesung's able to just slack that off and, force Mcmeghan into something that he doesn't necessarily want to go into. So he winds up for the Focus Punch as Slowking gets out of the way, goes right into Skarmory, and this is like what I said before, Skarmory is going to take a ton of damage coming in on the Focus Punch. So after that 55%, it's pretty dangerous to Roost here, because if Mcmeghan goes for Focus Punch again, like he does, this will obviously die, because without the Flying type added resistance, that'll do somewhere in the realm of 110%. Skarmory can't lift that. So Mcmeghan winds up for the Focus Punch again, and Tesung says, okay, I know I can't Roost here, let me just get rid of this Breloom. So he Brave Birds and brings himself down to 8% after leftovers 14%. It can come in on rocks again, but, it's not looking too hot. He pulls the Skarmory out of the way right into the Slowking, anticipating the Ice-type attack. The Icicle Crash does come off, but it misses the Slowking, which isn't a huge deal because it would have done pretty negligible damage anyway. So Mcmeghan pulls out of the way and brings Dragonite in, takes 6.5% from the Scald, but more importantly does not get burned, so that's pretty notable. Dragonite in this gen is typically, when it is run, there's the two more common variants, I believe, are a Hurricane one in Rain and a Choice Banded one anywhere else. So in this case, we do not see leftovers on the Dragonite, so we know that it is, it's not Dragon Dance or something like that, most likely, unless it's a Lum variant. So Mcmeghan pulls back out of the way into Mamoswine. Tesung obviously doesn't want to let Slowking take a Choice Banded Outrage, so he plans on his part to just sack off the Skarmory. Still wanting to save it for sack fodder, he pulls back out into Slowking, anticipating the Ice-type move because Mcmeghan's not insane enough to Earthquake there. and basically takes that Ice Shard for nothing and gets 10% damage on the Mamoswine. So Mcmeghan pulls back out into the Dragonite, and we're sort of rinse repeating here just a little bit. The Scald does a little bit more now that Multiscale is broken, but most importantly, still does not get the burn. So Dragonite. Oh, I shouldn't skip past it that quickly. So Dragonite has free range to launch off an attack here, and Mcmeghan correctly predicts that he does not want this to take an outrage again. Tesung's fine with letting his sleeping Tyranitar go down now that Breloom is dead, because Breloom doesn't get a free score off when it's in on anything slower than itself. So Mcmeghan actually correctly calls that and goes for the Earthquake. That covers both the Tyranitar play and the potential Magnezone play. In case he wanted to cover a dragon, like an outrage or something like that. It didn't cover the Skarmory, but I think as we had seen before, Mcmeghan correctly understood that Tesung wanted to save Skarmory for sack fodder when he absolutely needed it, and probably wasn't willing to throw it away just yet. So Dragonite is able to kill the Tyranitar. The crit I don't think matters too much because he wasn't going to double out most likely. So we see Shaymin come in. The assumption being that he now kind of knows that this Dragonite is choice banded. So Shaymin won't take terribly much from a Earthquake, and he just throws off what you could assume is the hidden power Ice. He gets a critical hit, but it still does next to nothing onto the Slowking. So good call on Mcmeghan's part, and he's going to pivot into his Dragonite, take the Seed Flare, and now he's able to switch up moves again, and if he wants to, can hit this Shaymin with some Dragon Stab. He, however, decides not to risk the fact that he might be slower than the Shaymin and pulls back out into Slowking again, taking the HP Ice just to see how Tesung responded to that situation. And then the next turn, knowing that he will live the Seed Flare, eats it, goes for the Fire Blast, and gets the Shaymin out of there. So with the Life Orb, Mcmeghan Slowking does go down. Another kind of wacky choice on Mcmeghan's part, but ensuring that he had enough health via Regenerator to live the Seed Flare and get the Fire Blast off. It's simply a veteran play. Now he's a little more free to go for ground type attacks with Mamoswine and with Dragonite when they are in. So Dragonite comes back out. Tesung throws out the good game early, but it is not over just yet. Dragonite comes out and he outrages into the Slowking for a huge amount of damage, 78.7%. But it doesn't get the kill, and the Psyshock brings it just into the range of Sand. So Tesung decides, okay, now is finally time to pull the trigger on sacking my Skarmory. The Outrage doesn't hit anything, but notably Mcmeghan gets a 2-turn Outrage here, so he is able to pull out of the way if he so pleases. And he does do that as the Slowking comes back in. Tesung playing for the 50% chance or the switch out in order to heal his Slowking back up. Mcmeghan deciding that, okay, he's probably going to do that. It's safe for me to go into my Scizor here because I don't think he's going to double right away into the Magnezone because he wouldn't gain terribly much by doing that. And most importantly, if he did do that, Mamoswine had a good chance to win the game from that point. So he goes out into the Scizor as the Slowking heals itself up. Here Mcmeghan goes for the Pursuit, catches the Slowking switching out, so that's pretty important because now it's going to be in Outrage range when it does come back in. That was a pretty notable play. So we see the Magnezone come in, and it just goes for HP Fire, takes care of the Scizor, and we're going to see the Mamoswine come in right after that. The Earthquake goes and takes care of the Magnezone. Now here is the last stage of the game. It looks like it's pretty firmly in Mcmeghan's control, but it's actually not 100%. Earthquake needs to keep this within a certain range. I forget the exact roll because I don't know if Tesung's exact spread. Actually, I think Tesung's the goofball who uses the Slowking spread that is functionally similar, or functionally identical to a possible Slowbro spread, so it's just being hipster at that point. But luckily Mcmeghan keeps getting the necessary Earthquakes. Tesung right now is fighting off a crit. If he does get crit, obviously he loses the Slowking. Mcmeghan on his part can't get like 4 or 5 low rolls in a row. But the important part is by saving by saving the Dragonite earlier on that turn where he was confused and at 2%. That's a pretty important play, and the one that makes this, I think, a really great game. Because if you remember the U-turn damage that Scizor did to Slowking earlier, basically if Mcmeghan had allowed Dragonite to die, Tesung had a pretty good chance of winning this game. Because if Dragonite's dead, because say Dragonite does say 75% damage, right? Then he could bring Slowking in, and if it's Slowking versus Mamoswine and Scizor, anytime Scissor's in, it has to go for U-turn in order to do a decent amount of damage to the Slowking. He can heal that off, and then once Mamoswine's in, he can slack off on that as well. And do exactly what he just did here, let this die via Life Orb Recoil. So by saving this Dragonite at 2 or 3% or whatever it is, Mcmeghan made what I consider a genius level play in order to ensure that he wins the game. Tesung, for his part, set up the conditions that he could late game when it was obvious that Mcmeghan had the upper hand. Tesung's play was intelligent in the sense that it gave him a chance to win, as opposed to just throwing his hands up and saying, "Okay, I'm going to lose from this point." He played a way where there were certain rules and certain things that could happen that actually would give him the win. So for both of their parts, for Mcmeghan having the foresight to see that he would need Dragonite's wall-breaking ability, and Tesung, for his part, finding the path that would lead him to still actually have a shot, even if it wasn't a very big one, that's what I think makes this game a classic. And all of this with the website's biggest trophy on the line. That's what I think makes this a really good game, and it's probably one of my favorite ever. And I like the goofball team choices on both their parts, and it was a pleasure to watch live. For those of you that don't know, Tesung goes on to win the whole series because Mcmeghan uses the final game was outrageous. Mcmeghan uses a meme team called "What Are You Doing?" Which features like 4 water types or something, and Tesung brought a Mega Venusaur. So that's all you probably need to know about how that game was won. But suffice to say, Tesung is a great player and definitely deserved the second trophy. And I think the Black-White game, this game will live on in people's memory a lot more than the other games that surrounded it. I don't even remember the DPP game, but so yeah, I think this is a strong entry for one of those classic games that people could definitely learn from. Thanks, peace.